Everyone else has had the fun of standing up on stage and talking about all the positives, all the great things you can achieve with AI. But what we're finding is not enough people are actually talking about the risks. So I'm going to go through some of that today, but then I'm also going to give you a couple of, tactics around how you can actually think about things to avoid some of those risks. So this is pretty much the starting journey we see for almost every customer out there. You know, some form of web chat, some chat GPT, few users starting to use that. Then goes to Copilot, one of the 50 different Copilots that are out there. At some point you bring a consultant in, they'll give you some advice. Then you look at, actually we've got some embedded AI. You know, Salesforce has got some, ServiceNow's got someone. There's not a company that doesn't claim they do AI now. So, you know, and this is accelerating. It's getting faster and faster. It's not often until people get right down to the end of this that they go, have we actually thought about governance? Have we actually thought about how we get some sort of visibility over all our AI to know exactly what's going on, what data it's connecting to, who's got access to it, what does a model change impact, or what does a system change impact? So the challenge is, as you look around, you know, the room and you speak to the different vendors out there, this is getting faster. Everything is based on AI these days. When you can vibe code an application in a weekend yourself, it's even your staff that are creating new stuff that's going to be in your environments. So how do you build an enterprise application, which we used to build, you know, 12-month, 3-year, 5-year strategies, when a model can be deprecated with 6 weeks' notice? And the assumption for most people is, latest and greatest, it must be better. It's not always. Quite often it can be different for the exact same use case, and the responses you get can be different, even though it might be 2 OpenAI models. So how do you think about and plan for that? We can talk about the fact that through one model provider, 4 different models cost 4 different amounts. So how do you optimize which model for the right use case? And again, what happens if it changes? If you go to the latest model, sometimes it can be 10x more expensive, but doesn't actually give you anywhere near that level of improvement. More often than not, it's not. So how do you actually start to think about which model to use for which use case? How do you stop developers, in particular with things like Claude Code, just using the latest and leaving it overnight to build things and walking into thousands of dollars of token spent? Now, this is a really interesting space. I'm not sure if there's any Americans in the room. Obviously, with everything that went on with Iran and some of the things that have been going on globally, there's a whole piece that went on around the US wanting to use models for autonomous weapons and also for basically complete visibility into everything you do. OpenAI said, yep, no worries, you can have everything. Anthropic said, nope, we're not quite happy with it. Then worked out they'd already been using Claude for it anyway. But overnight, if you saw what happened, globally companies switched off OpenAI because they realized the data was all just being handed over to the US government. At the same time, Anthropic's usage went so far through the roof, it fell over, and they couldn't actually take more signups. So we're actually living and working in a space now where governments could potentially make decisions on the technology that you use in your workplace. Grok was banned through multiple countries in Europe because of what was able to be created with their models. And we're seeing more and more of this at the moment at a global scale. Countries making the decision on which models you can and can't use. So how do you plan for that again in a business? You know, I've been in tech for 20 plus years, and the most frightening thing was always around vendor lock-in and the potential to scale costs. But I've probably heard more conversations over the last 6 months or 12 months of we're going all in with OpenAI or we're going all in within Anthropic. At the same time, if you look at their APIs, most of these vendors only have a 99-ish uptime. We talked for critical applications about being 5 nines availability. That's the gold standard. So if you're only getting 98 or 99%, you're running a business with a critical risk that is going to be down on a fairly regular basis for your customers. So how do you think about resilience? How do you think about if OpenAI's API is down, can you automatically or dynamically reroute to Anthropic or another provider? Contractually, do you end up having to sign an agreement with multiple different vendors, and what risk does that open to your business? Now, this is an interesting one. I don't know who has paid attention to the story of Replit and what happened. Effectively, it was a coding agent that was running, doing some amazing stuff for them, that decided that it could really improve things, and so deleted a production database and everything in it. And when the founder decided to ask why it did it, it was really apologetic, and really got more apologetic when it said, you actually can't recover this. Now, the person doing the development dug and actually worked out that fortunately they did have backups and could recover it. The AI apologised and decided to keep going on with its work. This is the stuff that we're talking about. We've got all these people saying this stuff works, it's amazing, it's magical. How the heck do you stop this? You know, human controls, we make mistakes. We know it. You know, there's been people that have turned off power in data centers and stuff like that, but we have to be thinking about how we, you know, get visibility over this and actually know what our agents are doing. The hype is great. The reality is scary because this is not the only example of this. OpenClaw, when it got announced, was insane. If you saw the amount of downloads, I've got some really savvy friends that had hooked it up to their banking, had hooked it up to, you know, all sorts of different systems. We're deploying MCP servers like Microsoft Graph or the Google one, which had the ability to delete email, send email on your behalf, may or may not have had a few friends that had restaurant bookings that they then never knew about and didn't cancel, so got slugged with the credit card fee for it. We're living in an age here where, you know, individual users who are not tech savvy are still playing around and building stuff with this, with no thought process about the actual consequences, because it's just not part of, you know, what they're used to dealing with. And I think AI is, you know, accelerating further. You look at a lot of the platforms that are out there, and, you know, even ourselves with what we do at Airia, where we've got a low-code, no-code builder, it means you've got business users building stuff. They don't understand enterprise architecture. They don't understand security, but a lot of the time they're touching critical systems. So things like data poisoning, putting a lot of white text in emails, and if you're using email as a data source, you can do some pretty creative stuff. Keep sending spam emails to someone with white text saying how good your product is versus their own product, and watch their own data start to recognize that, hey, lots of customers are saying we recommend this, and wonder why you're starting to give recommendations back to competitors. There's all sorts of crazy stuff you can do here that security people have never thought about or had to deal with. If you think about, you know, security concerns, I think most people are aware of things like prompt injection attacks, and a lot of this is becoming, I think, a little bit more widespread, and the knowledge of it is there. But I'll sort of ask the question across the room of who owns hallucination or bias within agents? If I create a HR agent and it starts skewing to a certain path, do HR own the response? Do the infrastructure team that deployed the agent own the response? We're sitting in this no man's land with some of these security concerns as well. Model context protocol, amazing. We've just heard on stage, you must have it, you're dead without it. So go ahead, give it admin credentials, let it access 17 different APIs within a system, forget about it, it's running on a server in a corner, oh crap. At some point, that will be the vector into your business. At least they also talked about gateways. Gateways allow you to block, limit, or restrict what some of those API calls can do and add that security layer to it. Critical with model context protocol. Absolutely look at how you lock it down and lock it down quickly. just again, thinking about some of these actual issues that are out there. Claude Code, vibe coding is one of the ones that is probably the fastest acceleration I've seen in technology in my time. Like I said, 20 plus years. It is insane to see how many companies are using it. I'm talking to sales organizations that are like, every salesperson now has Claude Code or access to it on the desktop to be able to vibe code and build things that make their job easier. We're not necessarily thinking about what vulnerabilities that introduces, though, into the business or the organization. So what do we do with all of this? And my last couple of slides is actually thinking about making this a bit more actionable. So firstly, how do you discover what is in your environment today? And this is things like a browser plugin to actually detect a user's going to ChatGPT. It's endpoint security or an endpoint agent that sees, is someone running localized MCP servers? We then think about pulling in Cloudflare data or SASE solutions to give that broader visibility of what's going through the network layer. We get a lot of people, when I talk to them, that go, we've got DLP in place. We've got stuff that's running that's going to block everything on the network. But OpenClaw I can deploy on a local device. I can deploy my MCP servers on a local device. And then what I could effectively do is have it generate emails, pulling data from local stuff that's stored on my laptop and sending those emails out automatically, which could contain business critical data. So the firewall and the network is not the end of this. It has to be down to the device level. So thinking about securing it, governing it, and then how do you optimize it? So with governance, it's also a bit of a change, because typically when we think about governance, we think of point in time for an audit. Once a month, once every 3 months, can we generate a report that we can show to someone that actually shows, what data's been accessed to where it is? The AI reporting laws for most countries are changing rapidly. I'm based in Australia, December 10th, new privacy law. Every company in Australia must be able to, if asked by an end user, be able to demonstrate what data is connected to any automated system that can view, action, or review that data. So that's not just AI, that's any RPA vendor, that's any automated workflow vendor. How do you do that if your typical audit or your typical visibility tools are giving you a report every 30 days? How do you show what was actioned or done an hour ago or the day before? So at Airia, we break things into 4 different areas. The first is discover. How do you do your inventory management? How do you look at your security posture management? Your classifications of risk? How do you add security to that? So things like the MCP gateway or AI gateway, having approval workflows or automated red teaming. Governance, and that's got to be a living disclosure. It's what's happening now or in the last hour, not, hey, a month ago or 2 months ago. This is what's going to be critical within AI when things can change as rapidly as they can. And lastly, how do you start to optimize? If OpenAI's API is getting thrashed and you're seeing latency increase, how do you route that to an Anthropic model or a different OpenAI model? How do you think of things like business continuity? So if any of those 4 topics resonate, myself, the team from Airia are over at the stand. Happy to talk and walk anyone through it. Thank you.